What is up, people? It is Dave, it is Duncan, back from Metal Epidemic for another album review. And for this review, Duncan and I have been checking out the new album from experimental electronic rock act Reformat. The band's new album, Precursed, was released on August 18th via Fearbone Records. Reformat create experimental music inspired by their shared love of heavy metal, electronica, vintage pop, and science fiction. Creator Luke Pajak and producer Russ Russell are joined by G. Russell on drums. After a short break following the release of their first album, The Singularity, in 2018, Luke began writing songs for Precursed in 2019. He comments, as the months went by, a variety of horrible life shit just kept coming, and I kept channeling it into new music as a way of surviving. Subsequently, where the last album was kind of built upon a sense of optimism, this one is definitely more energized by anger and grief caused by some of the endlessly shit situations we found ourselves in. Perhaps it hasn't had the impact to the final sound that I feel it has. Ultimately, it's still uplifting rock electronic music with a focus on melody. With the songs written, the band entered Russ's studio to record drums and guitars together in March 2020, the same week that lockdown was announced. Nice.
Oh.
That turned everything upside down for a time while we found new ways to survive a crazy time. I also got COVID, which never properly fucked off, and meant summoning the energy to finish the rest of the album has been a monumental effort, Luke adds. Towards the end of the year, Jay and Russ managed to track drums at Parlour Recording Studio in November, while I listened to a feed and watched via FaceTime. I then re-recorded the guitar and synth tracks from London to lock in with the new drums. We'd got Jay's parts down just in time before things exploded with Yard Act, his other band, and he went off touring the world. With Precursed, Luke wanted to produce something more direct and raw and felt it needed at least partly human voice to give focus to some of the emotion running through these songs. In the end, he approached the vocals with a mixture of heavily processed human voice and also some vintage speech synthesis. Luke concludes, I like the fact that I can no longer remember where my voice ends and the speech emulator built by my brother and utilising the BBC micro speech software begins. I'd also like to claim this love of vocal processing is influenced by someone cool like Cynic, but if I'm honest, it's more Cher and Dane Bowers who have taken up residence in my psyche since the late 90s. Nice.
Do you believe in love?
We're fairly new to these guys, but we played one of their singles on a recent podcast, and I knew instantly, as soon as I heard it, I was like, oh, fucking hell. This has Duncan written all over it. This is ticking so many boxes. It is ridiculous. So, I'll let you kick off because I have a feeling you're going to have plenty to say about this new album from Reformat. So what did you think of Precursed?
I'm going to actually condense it down to one sentence. This is shite. ... Not.
You old joker, yeah.
So like a smasher. So, like, Detrusa was the track that we got in. It had just been released as a single, and I can't even remember how it. I know we played it on the podcast, but I can't remember if it was a case of this is the final track. Like, peek behind the curtain. We don't listen to this. Like, Dave listens to songs, he picks them. I hear them when I put them in the edit, so it's post. I never come off the track play and go at that. Well, that was a great song, Dave, because I haven't heard it yet. But I remember you saying something on like the way you described it in a particular way got my attention.
Yeah.
And then I think like I actually ended up listening to the track whilst we were chatting for another hour after recording because that's our lives. And I remember coming off that just going like, I need this album. And you were like, I may already have it. And I was like, well, give me it. And that was, what, 2 months ago?
Yeah, it was a while ago, yeah.
Yeah, it was a while ago. So this album has just been, you know when they say like, oh, this idea's been living rent-free in my brain? This album has been living rent-free on my phone for about 2 months. So as a result, I've had a lot of time to like come at this from wildly different positions and actually mature into my final comments and score on this. You mentioned that like I come from a background of specifically enjoying science fiction scoring of movies, bands that are influenced by science fiction, but more importantly, the synth. It's my instrument of choice. It's what I enjoy, and I like it when bands push that envelope, specifically in the rock world. And it's more. There was a time period it was only in prog, and notwithstanding this year, you can't pay me to listen to prog. So, but there are certain bands that utilize it in a really smart way, and more recently, bands have been pushing that envelope and making a move to try and kind of flesh out that more. And before we get to Reformat, bands more recently that have kind of captured my imagination on that one, Genghis Tron, their album a couple of years ago, which was my album of the year, which I still fucking play to death, was like an album that was just like a revelation for me, in that the synth work was really, really, really fucking well crafted. But I didn't feel they lost any of that kind of grit or teeth from the rock side. They just changed the approach of it. But like, I'm a huge Three Trap Tigers, which I'm going to mention about 17 million times during this. They have an album called Silent Earthling, which came out in 2016. It was the last full-length album that band released, and I would say it's maybe in my top 5 listened to albums that came out between the years 2010 and 2020. I spin it all the time. I fucking adore it. I think it's like just a masterclass. Reformat exists in a bubble similar to Three Trap Tigers than they would in a bubble which is similar to Genghis Tron. I don't think they are as complex as Three Trap Tigers, who are at times percussively very obtuse. They go for almost jazz like level time signatures and approaches to their percussion. Reformat like go more down the rock thing, so to kind of like label themselves as a kind of science fiction synth rock act is probably the best description. I think there are moments on this where they remind me of some of the kind of fuckery that a band like Enter Shikari were doing, like almost 20 years ago, minus the kind of British new metal thing that was going on at the time. Now, I could go track by track. I'm not going to do that because like no one wants to hear me go track by track. We'll hide that behind the paywall, Dave, where nipple tassels are optional, but not always guaranteed. So the journey I've went on this has morphed a couple of times. The very first time I listened to it, I wasn't completely sold on it. I was kind of frustrated actually a little bit in that I'd heard Detrusa already, and Detrusa was such a well-crafted and at times inherently dark song that some of the other quirk on the album didn't really work for me. Specifically, a lot of the aforementioned vocoders and voice effects didn't land with me all that well the first time, which is weird because I used to have a vocoder and I fucking loved it. But at times I felt like it was an element that was needless, and I would much rather have it just to been stripped out. By about a month of this being with me, I'd 180'd on that quite hard, and I was like, this is what makes the album. It rims the whole fucking thing out. I actually felt like it was the difference between listening to a soundtrack and a score, which this definitely has elements of, and actually listening to songs is having that as a kind of central core element to focus your attention on. Is what are the vocoders doing? What emotion are they actually... Like for machine sounding vocals, they actually deliver a ton of very, very, very sad melody. I think it's like very smartly used. So that was like month 1. Month 2, it completely changed. Not that I dropped anything, but I'd actually like focused down more on the actual structure of the album, which is like a weird... It's like the album is staring itself in a mirror. It's weird to describe. The first half of the album flips over and almost reverses itself on the way out. Not in terms of using the same motifs, although it does do that. By the time you get Prince Volume, it's playing with motifs from several songs before. But actually, the way the songs are kind of structured and sound invert after the halfway mark to the close.
Mm.
And it was at that point that I started going like that. This is a different level. It's like this is like all the stuff I'm enjoying has just moved up a level.
Mm.
They have a lot of techniques they use and a lot of sims that are the same. And that's not a knock. I like that.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of bands, when given the option of, I have a synthesizer that has 50 sims on it, I'm going to use all 50 sims. It's a terrible idea. Never do it. If you have a sound picked for your kind of bassier synth parts, or maybe 2 sims you like, use those 2 sims for the entire album. If you have a particular sim that you're using for arpeggios or whatever, use that sim more. Like don't make it sound like in between every song we're gonna have to wait for you to load a new patch in your fucking synth. And 2 seconds, guys. No, it's not loaded yet. No, that's not right. 2 seconds, guys. You know, I don't want that. I want something that sounds cohesive. This album sounds cohesive.
Yeah.
It is. It weirdly reminded me at times of, there is a duo called Lematos who did the score for a ton of kind of B-movie stuff. More importantly, they did the score for a movie called Turbo Kid, which I fucking love. I love Turbo Kid. No surprise for anyone. Dave doesn't like it. No surprise there. But Lematos did a score for Turbo Kid, which I think is like chef's kiss great synth stuff. And they've done other things as well, but like specifically on that one, it's just fucking sublime. And some of the quieter moments on that, the more introspective moments, remind me a lot of Precursed. Like just the synth choice, the sims they've used, are just like it's in that wheelhouse. And it sounds fucking great. I think, like I say, I don't want to go song by song. I genuinely, it's difficult, especially on an album like this, to like, because I'm going to go into the integers of the reason this bass sound works is because I don't want to do that. I will say this about it: it's not a long album. It's under 40 minutes. You're getting 11 songs, and each song kind of feels like its own little movie. It's weird to describe, or its own little level in a computer game. And I love it. Like when I'm listening to this, I am troned in like fuck. It's like the Tron bike. There's just a line of neon coming out of my forehead, just following all the fucking notes that the synth's playing. The guitar work, and like, I'll focus on the synths because it's a prominent part of this. The guitar work is great on this because it's in the pocket all the way through it. It never at any point overshadows anything else that the band's doing, which might sound like I'm saying the guitar's not memorable. Exact opposite of that. The guitarist knows the role of this band, it knows the role of the sound, it knows it's also not the prominent instrument, and as a result plays backup, very similar to what a bassist would do in a band. And as a result, I love that. The added benefit of having a live drummer, it's the reason 3-Trap Tigers is like the shit for me, because their inclusion of an actual real drummer takes it away from that just sounding like someone sat in the room all night writing a song. And it works on here as well. There's a very kind of, especially on tracks like when you're listening to Detrusa, and it's basically the Burn 9 Inch Nails fucking drum beat.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, yes, this, because obviously 9 Inch Nails are my favourite band, Dave. This is my wheelhouse. These are my peeps. I feel for the guy who, look, I think it was you said, who basically went through all the shit to get this out here. I would say to him, as some weird consolation from a guy he doesn't know that's reviewing something on fucking YouTube, I think it's benefited the album. I think there is a attention to detail, a core in the sound, a level of composition and soul on this that layers up, especially towards the end of the songs, and this is what they are amazing at. At the end of the songs, they are masters of the crescendo. They bring all the elements back you've got, and then you always get some sort of vocal or melody line that lifts the track up towards the end. And that's the film scoring in it, you know, like you finish on this high note, and they do it so fucking well. Fucking love this. Absolutely, to death. Listen to it to death. Spun it to death. And what was fun is we spoke about this, I think, about a week after I listened to it. I was like, you know, just like reminds me of Three Trap Tigers, but not as good as Three Trap Tigers. They're not the same band. I think it's fine to do some comparisons. I think overall they're kind of lazy comparisons because they're in different worlds, even though they occupy the same kind of oxygen. This is, if you're not in on the synth shit and you really just want guitar-driven music, you're not going to be won over by Reformat and Precursed. However, if you're an intelligent, sexy, and hung fellow, like myself,
thanks
and
hopefully,
Dave, hopefully, Dave, you'll lean in on this one because I think it's full of great songwriting, clever ideas, excellent production, and really, really, really smart album placement. The through line on this one, like I say, once you get through Detrusa, the album almost loops back with ideas and tempos and stuff towards the end, and then closes really strong. Prince Volume into Post Breath are two definitive. This is the end of the album tracks. It brings you in. Yeah, I unabashedly love this. I have to talk for another half an hour about it, but no one will. This will be you can check the analytics on YouTube. People are probably already dropped off. So Dave, as a guy that is maybe not as acclimated to the synth as I am, as a guy who did like Three Trap Tigers though, and did like Genghis Tron, doesn't like Nine Inch Nails, but we won't hold that against you. I'm super curious on this for you because I don't know. See, if you told me you just thought this album was okay, that would track. See, if you told me you loved this album, that would also track. Nothing would surprise me right now. If you told me you didn't like it, I don't think we can be friends anymore, so.
Well, Duncan, tell me you like an album without telling me you like an album.
All right.
I'll tell you. I've already pre-ordered a t-shirt, Duncan.
You didn't pre-order the same one,
I don't know.
Please tell me. Oh, well, I've got the skull one.
Yeah, I've got the skull one.
Oh, for fuck's sake, Dave!
It was the coolest one.
It was the coolest one. Reformat, we love you. You have to have two super cool t-shirts so me and Dave can have different t-shirts. We're not going to have to coordinate.
Two sexy as fuck, hung like fuck guys wearing the same t-shirt at your concert.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I'm not wearing the same t-shirt as you at the concert. Fuck that.
Okay, fair enough. I was the same as you. Heard the truth and I was like, right, firstly, Duncan's going to fucking shit his pants when he hears this album or hears this track. Need to get this, need to check it out. I am not obviously, I don't smoke the synth as much as you smoke the synth, but I do enjoy the synth. I do enjoy a smoke of the synth every now and again. When you pass me the synth.
Smoke of the synth, slap of the bass. What are we doing here?
I don't know. Reformat. So, there's so much to discuss here, but such a mix of elements going on in this album that it's kind of hard to stick a label on it and say, oh, they sound like this band or they sound like that band. Sure, they have similarities, and I totally get the that kind of like experimental kind of fluidity of a band like Three Trap Tigers, but I'd say I agree with you. I think Reformat are more on the kind of rock side, and I think they lean harder on the electronic side than that band do as well. That being said, this album has less of a sci-fi streak than its predecessor. The Singularity, which came out 2018, that album, I went back and listened to that. That is like super cosmic, very space themed musically in a lot of places. And I think like when I listened to that and in this album, I think it has a lot to do with the synth sounds they've used, a lot of the atmosphere and the kind of chord progressions that they used on that album. It still had like that kind of rock edge to it. With a little bit of a dash of the progressive, but I feel like the balance and the focus of it was definitely more on the electronics and synths on that album. The kind of dynamic on this album has shifted a bit. The synth sounds, for one, are quite different to the Singularity. I did read that Luke had changed since for this album. So he went from the Roland Juno 106, which
Mm-hmm.
is like an analog synth, which I think came in the 80s actually.
Yeah.
And he's moved to the Sequential Prophet 6, which is again analog, but it's got more of a slightly more modern kind of twist to it. It's a bit kind of
Mm-hmm.
warmer in tone, still very punchy, but kind of brings together that kind of like vintage and modern together. And I think that change has definitely lessened a bit of the sci-fi edge on this release. I think the synth work on this I think is way more interesting for me. There's much more variety on this album. Each track has something different that will kind of
Mm-hmm.
catch your ear. That I felt like the tracks on this album had that kind of individuality. Where I was on the last album on the Singularity, it was almost like a kind of constant theme or motif that ran throughout the album. So they all had a very similar feel. And I think that difference has made this album far more memorable musically for me. There were moments on this album that really stood out and really kind of pulled me into the album. I think the warmer kind of synth sounds are fantastic and they really open the album up. They work well in building the tracks as well.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of really, really clever stuff going on here. Nice, interesting layers with nice melodies, little bits of kind of glitchy tones over the top. So there's a lot to kind of keep you engaged. And the fun thing is that the tracks aren't overly long either.
No.
And I think that works in the album's favour. I think they don't linger on. They're like between 3 and 4 minutes most of the tracks. So I think they do a great job of keeping the momentum of the album going, but it never becomes repetitive or overdrawn in any kind of way. There's also the addition of the vocals on this album, which weren't on the debut. They're used kind of sparingly, but I
Mm-hmm.
think they add this other layer to the album, another kind of a layer of hooks to some of the tracks. The tracks like Saigon have this kind of like dreamy kind of Genghis Tron vibe, but it's got this addition of this kind of like electro kind of shoegaze vocal
Mm-hmm.
that works like brilliantly. The melody is fantastic, and it almost gives the tracks more structure to them as well because it
Yeah.
has that kind of like reoccurring chorus as well. But I also love the fact that they also didn't need to use it either. There are tracks
Mm-hmm.
here that work perfectly fine without any vocals on them. Paroxysms has no real kind of lead vocal part, but there's so much going on synth-wise that I never missed it at all. Also, want to add that the playing on that track in particular was fucking awesome.
Yeah.
The guitars and bass and the drums are not only giving you like plenty of groove and backbone on that track, but they also drop in these little kind of progressive bursts of rhythms and really cool fills. So there's always something kind of drawing your attention on the track. The album flows so well. Like this, from
Yeah.
one track to the next, it is so good. Like really, just such a cohesive sounding album. And I mentioned that the tracks have their own little bit of personality, but there's also something musically at the core of them that kind of holds them all together as well. I loved how it all kind of blended into one as well. You know, it felt like kind of one piece, but with different chapters. I especially love that kind of middle section, that first with Detrusa, which is just like such a well executed track. I can see why they released it as a single. It's the longest track, but it kind of peaks brilliantly in the middle with a really nice uplifting melody. But it pairs so well with Dead Place being right after it as well. Something really 80s in the synth sound on that track,
Mm-hmm.
even down to the kind of bass notes and the reverb on the drums as well. I love that. Astromax is also really good. I really like the tempo switches from Jay on that track. Just love the fact there's live drums on it as well. I think it just gives it
Yeah.
such a more kind of fluidic, natural kind of feel. Yeah, I thought this was really good. It feels for me like a clear step up from the last album, musically, thematically, and the production sounds fucking awesome. Like huge sounding production.
Yeah.
And it's cool to hear someone like Russ Russell, who is predominantly known for his work with Napalm Death and At the Gates, to be doing something like this, which is so different to those bands, but showing that it doesn't really matter what the genre is, he will absolutely knock this out of the park
Yeah. If you're a
regardless.
good producer, you don't need to worry about that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's weird because initially I thought when I started playing this album, I was like, oh, this is going to be like an album I'm going to listen to in between heavier albums. But then when I heard it all the way through and then I gave it multiple spins, the kind of more rewarding I started to find it. And then I was like, this is more than a breather album. This is an album that you could just listen to any time of the day, like regardless where it is in your playlist. So yeah, really enjoyed this. Thought it was really well executed, and I agree with Duncan. I think whatever kind of experience that Luke went through, I think it has benefited the album.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it's come up with such a really good product at the end. So yeah, really enjoyed it. What we thinking scores for Precursed? What are you thinking?
So Precursed is for me in 2023 what Earthrise was for me in 2022. It's an album that I've found myself playing at night, almost every night, when in the wee hours when I can't sleep.
Yeah.
Which is often. The good headphones go on. I like sit on my couch, the lights are off, and I play this album, and I just get absorbed and lost in it. I mean, there's always going to be a degree of bias when an album comes out, and it just hits all my sweet spots. I mean, this is if there was a band that just had a clipboard of all the stuff that I love about music, Reformat kind of do that, and Precursed nails it. I've been giving this grade out a lot this year. I'm going to do it again. 5. I fucking love it. There's not a moment on this that I don't think is just perfect.
Yeah.
Like they should be so immensely proud of what they've done. Like I said before, it's not for everyone. I don't want everyone listening to this album. I'm not in the band, so I don't have to shift units. So also I want to make sure I get my pre-order, and I don't know how many they're making. No, I genuinely think this is a fucking chef's kiss of an album. It will be in my top 10 of the year. There's no doubt of that. And it's because it's not like anything else I've listened to this year.
Yeah.
It just is. It occupies a different space, a different sphere of my interest, and I think it does it. I can't see me stop listening. Like, there's no way I'm going to stop listening to this album anytime in the next 4 or 5 months before we do our lists. I think it's fucking great. So,
Wow.
5!
Oh,
Fucking 5, motherfucker.
nice. I'm not far behind you. I'm 4.5 on this one.
That's huge coming from him, guys. Listen, Reformat, he usually doesn't capitulate like that.
No, I do not. But when I was listening to this, I was thinking to myself, this would be awesome to see live.
Oh man, yeah.
And that's kind of when I know that I've been listening to something awesome, because I'm already thinking about what the live show is going to be like. Yeah. This was definitely a high score for me. Great album. Love the inclusion of the vocals. Keep doing that. I think it's definitely elevated the album, and opened up more possibilities for what you can do next. And if you play Scotland, we'll be there.
Oh, we're there. We're fucking there. We're maybe wearing the same t-shirt apparently, but I mean, that's only awkward for us. So
so that is Reformat, Precursed, out on August 18th on Fearbone Records. Links below at the band. Links below to the Bandcamp where you can pre-order it. Check out the merch. Check out those t-shirts. But don't get the same one as me and Duncan, because, we can't be seen with anyone else that are wearing those t-shirts.
It's going to be awkward if everyone shows up.
Let us know what you think. Have a listen to the album, have a listen to the singles, drop some comments in below. Happy to hear your thoughts on it. That is a review. Thank you for checking it out. We'll be back with another review very soon, but until then, take care. Speak to you soon.
Bye, everyone.